Good Wednesday afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Kare 11 News Now. I'm Morgan Wolf. This afternoon, Minneapolis leaders are sharing their safety plan for summer. It's an operation that happens every year and involves several agencies across the city. The Minneapolis Police Department, of course, is leading this effort.
Public safety is a shared responsibility. No single agency can do this work alone, and our greatest successes come when we do it together. Operation Safe Summer has a proven track record of results, arresting violent offenders, recovering illegal firearms, seizing dangerous narcotics, and disrupting criminal activity that harms our neighborhoods.
That was a newly appointed interim MPD chief, Bill Peterson. He says that MPD is working with those other agencies to hone in on what he called a small number of criminals committing a large amount of crime, and doing that, making the city safer. So MPD says that the Operation Safe Summer has resulted in close to 400 arrests of violent offenders and more than 140 guns taken off the streets in the 5 years since its inception. New today, the Minnesota Star-Tribune announcing it is cutting 15% of its workforce. The Tribune says that this comes as they are eyeing a potential new ownership structure. They say that the cuts will be made across every department, including the newsroom, which will lose 25 journalists. It was just last year when 125 employees were laid off after closing its downtown Minneapolis printing plant. Also just this year, they won a Pulitzer Prize for their coverage of the Annunciation school shooting. This summer, Minnesota will be home to one of the most heated Democratic Senate primaries in the country, and that is between Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan and Congresswoman Angie Craig. Flanagan got the endorsement of her party at this weekend's state convention, but Craig says that primary voters should decide the nominee. Danny Spiewak talked with both of them this week.
With control of Congress at stake, two high-profile Democrats in Minnesota are aiming for the U.S. Senate seat left open by Senator Tina Smith. Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan will have the resources of the state party after earning the DFL endorsement this weekend.
The DFL endorsement carries a lot of weight.
While Congresswoman Angie Craig skipped the endorsing convention to focus on the August primary, where she has a significant advantage in campaign cash.
We've always known that this primary was going to be decided on August 11th, not at the convention.
Now, the two candidates have 70 days to make their case. Flanagan backs policies such as Medicare for All and universal child care, with endorsements from national progressives like Senator Bernie Sanders.
We don't have to agree on every issue, but what I am very clear on is that I am running to help people afford the lives they want to live.
Craig calls herself a pragmatic progressive and often points to bills she's passed in Congress, such as the cap on insulin prices, as proof that she's more electable in November.
This is going to be a dogfight for the general, and I know that I'm the strongest candidate that DFLers could put up.
But a competitive primary brings more scrutiny on the candidates. For Flanagan, that means answering questions about Minnesota's fraud response, which led Governor Walz to end his bid for a third term.
As the second leading executive in the state, to what extent should voters hold you accountable for the fraud that occurred?
Well, I want to be very clear that, Minnesotans are upset. They're angry about fraud, and, so am I. I know that this is an important issue to folks. What I would say is, the governor has said he wished that more had been done to tackle fraud. More should have been done sooner, and I agree.
For Craig, the response to Operation Metro Surge has become a defining issue. After voting for one of President Trump's top immigration bills, the Laken-Riley Act, she now says she regrets the vote.
Do you believe primary voters in the Democratic Party will really be able to overlook that?
Well, I'm communicating directly with them every single day on this topic. Democratic primary voters understand that I took this vote. I've communicated that any vote that gave Donald Trump and Republicans any additional authority under ICE, whether they're using it or not under Operation Metro Surge, that I regret that. But these voters also know that I stood up to ICE at the Whipple Detention Center.
Ultimately, Democratic voters across the state will decide the party's nominee in November. Danny Spiewak, Kare 11 News.
The Republicans will also have a competitive primary this August for the U.S. Senate seat. Former Navy SEAL Adam Shorzy won the party's endorsement this weekend, but former broadcaster Michelle Tafoya is going to challenge him with a significant edge in campaign funding. Right now, crews are going to be back in northern Minnesota trying to put out the Birch Bay wildfire that has been growing. It's been burning just north of Ely in the Superior National Forest since Monday afternoon. Officials say that it has burned 35 acres so far, but luckily no structures have been destroyed. They say that firefighters had a successful day of suppression work and did not see much of that fire spread. Despite that, though, officials are expecting another day of near critical fire weather and are reminding the public to keep their distance. We have new video today showing the aftermath of the deadly Iranian attacks in the Persian Gulf. The strikes killing one person and injuring dozens of others. They also caused Kuwait to close its main airport. The strikes between Iran and the U.S. are threatening the fragile ceasefire and stalling peace talks between the two countries. Richard Engel is in Israel with a closer look.
There have been several exchanges of fire between Iran and the United States over the last several days, but this was the most severe, with the U.S. carrying out a strike on a military position in Iran, Iran firing at Bahrain and Kuwait. In Kuwait, the main airport being hit with Iranian missiles and drones, according to Kuwaiti officials. The foreign ministry saying that there was extensive damage to Terminal 1, the airport suspending flights and reporting at least one person was killed. It seems that Iran's strategy is to try and break the U.S. military blockade of Iran, the naval blockade that is blocking ships from entering or leaving Iranian ports. And Iran is attacking countries that are hosting U.S. troops. And there are a lot of American bases in both Kuwait and in Bahrain. U.S. CENTCOM says that the blockade is still in effect and that it has turned back many ships and disabled ships since the blockade began in April. Richard Engel, NBC News, Tel Aviv.
An update out of St. Paul. The city's attorney's office says that no state charges will be filed in connection with a January protest at city's church. The city attorney says that prosecutors determined there wasn't enough evidence for criminal charges. In January, protesters went to the church to speak out against a pastor who worked at the local ICE field office. Several protesters are still facing federal felony charges, including a local journalist and also Don Lemon. More delays right now for the George Floyd Square project. A Minneapolis City Council committee rejected the mayor's proposal to give Minnesota Agape Movement development rights. The People's Way project would have involved replacing the old gas station at 38th in Chicago, turning it into a 6-story building with a cafe and museum. However, several council members said that that is not the plan they or the community supported.
We are concerned that the Minnesota Agape Movement may not have the experience and support for carrying out this proposed project.
The proposal still has to be voted on by the entire council. If they also deny it, the mayor then will have to decide whether to veto. New today, Allina Health hospice nurses are heading back to the bargaining table. Union leaders are sitting down with the hospital today. It comes less than 24 hours after nurses voted to authorize a one-day strike if the negotiations don't go well. Union leaders say that they are fighting for a better work-life balance, fair caseloads, and also holiday pay. Well, if you have ever taken your dog to the Minnehaha Off-a-Leash Dog Park, this story is going to grab your attention. A growing number of Minneapolis Park Board commissioners are backing a plan to close that popular park, saying that the land is sacred to the Dakota people. Here's Heidi Wigdahl with what could happen next.
For dogs and their owners, the Minnehaha Off-Leash Dog Park is a popular spot along the Mississippi River, but there are questions about the land.
The Park Board has learned through studies as well as interviews with indigenous historians and other members of the community that the area around Minneowassee, or Coldwater Spring, is considered a sacred site to the Dakota people.
Minneapolis Parks and Recreation Board Commissioner Jason Garcia says they learned the area is of significant cultural and archaeological importance. Advocates say it's a burial site. An assessment was also done last summer, but Garcia says those findings are classified under a state law.
It didn't feel right to continue to use it as an off-leash dog park.
Commissioner Garcia is introducing a resolution to begin the process of decommissioning the off-leash dog park.
Having access to a large free-range dog park, super great. Like, she loves being off leash and kind of just running around.
But Eric Carbonell says if it shuts down, there are plenty of other off-leash parks.
So if they have to remove one to honor cultural or spiritual significance, that's fine.
I understand they want to keep the dogs off the bluffs. I am all for that. I used to go up there occasionally with my dogs. I don't anymore since I heard about that.
Mark Mendel comes here every day with his dog, Zorro.
And this is a sacred space to a large, diverse community. I was all for putting up a fence to block off the bluff, but I understand some of the Native American community object to that. I'm respectful of their views, but bigger signs, be respectful, keep your dogs off the bluff. I think that would do it.
The advisory council and the tribes have said that's your boundary, that's not our boundary of where the sacred site, ends, where the National Park Service land is.
Maggie Lorenz serves on the Park Board's Native American Advisory Council.
For Native people, it's never been an appropriate use, and that's something that we would have wanted to ever see at that location. These places are like our church almost, or like our graveyards or cemeteries. We just want them to be treated with the respect that other places are treated for people that go and pray and go and visit their deceased relatives. That's all we're looking for.
We wanted to make sure that we were trying to combat the systemic removal of Dakota people from their lands, particularly these sacred sites.
Today, Commissioner Garcia introduced the resolution to the board's planning committee. If that passes, then it will be heard by the full board. If decommissioned, the area would stay park land and available to visitors, but not as an off-leash recreation area. Garcia said that they would also look at other areas nearby that could work then as an off-leash dog park. Well, this morning we are getting a first look at one of the largest summer traditions in Minneapolis. The Minneapolis Aquatennial will return for its 87th celebration. It's going to be July 18th through the 26th, and it does have new leaders. The city announced the Aquatennial Ambassador Organization will take over after the Minneapolis Downtown Council stepped away from the festival last year. The group is made up of community leaders and volunteers who will oversee the week-long event.
This is an important year. This is not the time for a civic celebration like this to not be thriving, to not be inviting people into Minneapolis. This is an important time. We've seen the resilience of Minneapolis, and you will see that again with the Minneapolis Aquatennial.
Some fan favorites will be returning this summer, including the Torchlight Parade and the Milk Carton Boat Rides. Stick with us. We got more news and weather coming up.